I'd like permission to study the Necronomicon.
The legend of the Necronomicon has it that long ago the Earth was inhabited by a species from another dimension, with certain chants from the book, coupled with ancient rites and sacrifices. This race, the old ones, can be brought back.
Welcome to Revolving Culture, a podcast where we take a look at popular culture and the ways that it affects us now, the historical significance of it, and where it's going to be heading in the future. So I am your host, Marty. My co-hosts are...
I'm Robbie.
Andrew.
I'm Jeremy.
And I'm Vicky.
And this week we're starting what's going to be about 4 episodes of the reason for the season. We're creeping up on October. It's time to really get into the type of stuff that's near and dear to our hearts, the creepy, the scary, the spooky. I think all those things mean the same thing. Today we're going to be looking at urban legends, folklore, some of our personal experiences with these sorts of legends, some of the historical legends that we've run across, as well as kind of where we think maybe the urban legends of the future might be found. And just as a quick note, we appreciate you bearing with us. We're trying some different methodology today, so we may or may not run into some audio artifacts or some technical difficulties. If that's the case, we certainly apologize. We appreciate you hanging in with us while we try to become a more flexible podcast and able to do things in multiple ways. Really, I don't know, is there anything, I think maybe we might be best served to go ahead and really sink our teeth into this topic. Does anybody have any personal experiences with urban legends that we've run across?
Yeah, I have a couple, actually. When I was a kid, my parents told me that a previous owner of our home, this elderly woman, lived there, and I guess at the time there was no central air, no AC in the home, so she had this small building in the backyard that had an AC unit in it, which got a lot cooler during the summer. So during the summer she would live out there, and I guess in the winter she would live in the house. My older brother, I think, told me that I guess at one point during the summer she, in her old age, died in that little house in the backyard, and her ghost still haunted it. So I never wanted to go near that building when I was a kid, and I never looked in the windows because I was told that if I looked straight into the windows at night, I would see her ghost. And yeah, that always creeped me out. Another one that involved the backyard of our house when I was growing up was we had there's this huge concrete slab in the backyard, and I was told that a mechanic lived there before we did, and so he would bring cars around the side of the house and park them in the back on the concrete slab so he could work on them. And for some reason, my cousin got a hold of it and told us that guy had a pet jaguar that he would, like the actual cat, he would keep it in a cage in the backyard while he was working on cars, and one day it broke out of the cage and killed him. And that was it. Yeah, those are close to home urban legends that my family made up, pretty much.
Those are good, those are good examples. Whenever you were talking about looking out your back window, it reminded me of when I was a kid, and we would go out to my childhood friends. His parents owned some land, and we'd stay with his grandparents, and his mom and dad would tell us creepy stories and stuff. And one of the stories was that if you're alone, I don't know exactly if this is how it goes, so bear with me. But if you're alone on a full moon night and you're like in the living room and you see a white owl, it means someone's gonna die in the like domicile that you're in. And that used to freak me out, man. Like, it used to scare the crap out of me.
Owls are supposed to be bad omens.
Yeah, like it was a white owl. I remember that much.
Yeah.
And then also,
somebody should have told the author of Harry Potter that, if that's the case.
I was just thinking that. I was like, that would have been a real bummer if you'd have been like, gotten an invitation to Hogwarts and you would have shooed the owl away. You would have been like, screw off, owl.
Get the fuck out of here.
They would have been like, sorry, man. I was just trying to let you know that you're going to wizard school, but I guess you don't want to go, so I'll leave then.
Get out of here, owl. What are you doing here? I have a personal story. It's familial. And I apologize if anybody in my family listens to this and disagrees with anything I say, or if I don't say it correctly, or if I leave something out. But I had an aunt. Her name was Tia Mary, and I have these three tias, or these three aunts. One's Janie or Juana, one's Tina, and the other one was Mary. And they all lived together in a small town right outside of San Antonio. This town's called Nixon. There's about 2,000 people who live in this very small town. You can walk across it in a few hours. But whenever she was young, I think she was 19 years old, there was a man who I think for the area was wealthy or something, and he was in love with her. The problem was that he was engaged or married. He was with someone, and she rebuked his advances, and I don't remember if he was upset or something, but either way, the person he was with found out, and I guess was upset by it. My aunt, they didn't own like a shower or indoor bathtub, so they'd bathe outside. And one day, she was cleaning up, and the way the story goes anyway, is that she, while washing her face in a bassinet or like a tub or something, she looked into the water and saw red eyes staring back at her, and she freaked out and went berserk.
Well, you would, wouldn't you?
Yeah. And my other aunts, Juana and Tina, ran outside to try to comfort her and figure out what was going on. Didn't understand why she was freaking out, why she was going insane. And so they're trying to pin her down, and they have to. I don't know if they call the 911 or what, but to this day, I believe it's my Aunt Tina, said that she looked, as she was trying to console my Aunt Mary, she looked towards a tree, and against the tree a man was standing, leaning against the tree, wearing all white, and he had burning red eyes. The weird thing, that's kind of creepy in itself. The weird thing is that this aunt, Mary, was schizophrenic, and she, from that day, they would take her to like a, what's the word, like not an asylum, but
mental facility.
Exactly, a mental facility.
Yeah.
And she stayed there for the next 19 years. So until she was into her late 30s, early 40s, she had to stay at this mental facility after this day where the story is corroborated by another aunt of mine. And
she received electroshock therapy.
Yes. And she was never right. And into her old age, she fell back into that state, and they lobotomized. Did they lobotomize her, or was it just electroshock therapy?
I think it was just electroshock therapy.
Yeah. So it's the creepiest thing that I know. That my family was involved.
Well, yeah, it would be, wouldn't it?
Yeah. So that was.
I believe I'd need electroshock therapy after seeing that.
So if you ever see a guy wearing all white with burning red eyes, try to stab him for me. Right.
Give him one for the auntie. It's maybe less an urban legend, but I can recall this has been back in the very early 90s. I was living with at that time my girlfriend and her mom, and they had gone off to do something for the day. To this day, I don't remember what. I'd come home from work. I had taken a shower, and while I was in the shower, I heard one of them holler at me. I just heard some voice was calling me, and so I finished my shower and got out, and there wasn't anybody there. And when she and her mom got home later that evening, I said, I apologize, I missed you guys. I didn't hear what you said. I was in the shower, and they were, we haven't been home. And I'm like, oh, well, your sister must have come by, which was a fairly common occurrence. And no, her sister was out of town. And I said, well, then who would have stuck their head in and said something this afternoon? And they're like, oh, you've met the ghost. And apparently, just from the time they'd had this house in Norman, Oklahoma, it had been haunted. And so periodically they would hear someone would be trying to talk to them, and they were never able to tell exactly what the person wanted. But it was just clear, there's a lot of times I'm I suppose skeptical or cynical enough to go like, I must have misheard that. No, it was a very clear voice. And so there's one of those things I certainly can't explain, but apparently it was easily explained by the fact that it was the ghost in the house. And I'd be hard pressed to argue too much. It fairly well creeped the crap out of me for a good week and a half after that.
All these stories have. What were you saying?
Oh,
Go ahead,
I was just going to say that I had kind of an odd one when my sister and I were younger. My parents would tell us that that we shouldn't necessarily be afraid of this, but that periodically the house was going to get visited by this person, and we said, well, what does the person want? Why are they coming here? And they said, well, they just come around periodically, and they'll occasionally leave things here in the house. And we said, well, why us? And they said, well, it's not just us. It's all the houses everywhere. And we tried to understand the nature of why they were coming around. And they said, well, they just they watch you the rest of the time and look at what how you've been behaving, and whether you've been behaving well or misbehaving, and the things that they leave behind when they visit are a reflection of how your behavior was the rest of the time. So
Holy crap.
Talking about old Kris Kringle.
maybe. Yeah, that's what I was talking. I mean, I wanted to see how long I could push it. Okay, I couldn't get very far.
This guy.
That was good.
Well, but it's a valid point, because I mean that is urban legend. I mean, we've talked a little bit about ghost stories. These are all, it's certainly appropriate for this time of year, but the Easter Bunny, Santa Claus, I mean, these are, we were told these urban legends, for lack of a better term, for ever since we were born, and this is a tradition that's gone on for hundreds of years. Robbie, your particular holiday urban legend that's near and dear to your heart would be the other side of the Christmas story.
Oh yeah. What I really rather wish my parents had told me, what was the case with regards to Santa and everything. And Santa's fun. Everybody loves Santa. How can you not? He's there to bring you presents. And
yeah,
worst case scenario, you don't get presents, you get coal instead, right? That's everybody's understanding of the contract that we have with St. Nicholas. Well, that wasn't always the case for everyone everywhere. In old country Europe, there was another figure present in the Christmas holiday mythology, and obviously if you were a well-behaved child, you would get visited by St. Nicholas, and that's really what you're hoping for. But what you wouldn't want to be visited by was a creature called the Krampus, who would come for ill-behaved children, and the Krampus is basically a half man, half goat, very 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 devilish creature who carries with him a bundle of sticks that have been lashed together that he uses to thrash misbehaving children, and after you've been thrashed, you'll be stuffed into the Krampus's sack and carried off into the mountains to be eaten. And I'm really glad to see, the kind of the cultural resurgence of the Krampus, and to be reminded, that sometimes, I said it, before in one of the other episodes that fear is the greatest motivator, and I think we lost something when we shelved the Krampus. He's
the flip side of because the reason I think I like the whole Krampus thing is that the whole story, the Santa Claus, when he brings you coal, my first thought is poorer children with no access to warmth and the bitter cold. Screw a sugar pig and a little wooden soldier. Exactly how bad do I have to be to get enough coal to be warm for the rest of the winter and not die of hypothermia? Do I need to beat an old person with a shovel? Krampus is a much more honest sort of that if you're bad, there is no upside. There is no situation in which a child might go, I would really wish to be visited by the Krampus.
It's a losing proposition if the Krampus is headed your way. Yeah,
that's it. What are you saying, Andrew? I'm sorry.
Where does Krampus originate from?
Germany, right?
Is it a German?
I think it's Germany or
sounds.
Yeah, like Germany and Austria, and just kind of a lot of northern and eastern European countries. I think they all have.
Not far from the birthplace of Santa Claus.
Yeah, really, and there are still plenty of those countries and cultures that revel in the Krampus and keep him as a dear part of the entire Christmas mythology. I think it's fair to call it that at this point. There's a festival carried out. Unfortunately, I don't know exactly where it's carried out, but it's called Krampusnacht, which is German for Krampus night, and it's just a night of it's comparable to something like the Mardi Gras Day of the Dead sort of celebration where even though he's this figurehead of evil and this completely sinister character, he's celebrated and people just.
And I mean,
we forget,
we had a movie come out just this last year in an attempt to bring the Krampus to more of an awareness in Western culture. I'll be curious to see if that particular ball rolls any farther as we start approaching this Christmas. Because I'm not aware of how big an impact that movie made. I don't know how much fanfare it got, but it's interesting that it's something that generally Western culture picks these things up and runs with it. And this seems like a decidedly Western culture thing. This is blood and bone mythology, but we've, as a Western culture, we've kind of either resisted or just haven't assimilated what feels to me like the most sort of, to borrow a board game term, the very most Ameritrashy kind of thing. I mean, it's just.
From my understanding, that movie was supposed to be somewhat comical. I mean, even the people and the actors in the movie, like Adam Scott and who is his wife. She's the lady that looks kind of like Anna Gasteyer. Can't remember.
Yeah,
they're both like
I saw the film and
basically.
Tonally, it's very jarring between moments of what feel like genuine attempts at horror and then kind of schlocky comedy. It had a very like Sam Raimi.
I was going to say Sam Raimi.
Yeah, but I loved it. I thought it was great. Yeah, to Marty's point about how it gets kind of like lost in translation. I think that's visibly true in a lot of fairy tales that began with a much more violent or sinister edge to them, and have been sanitized over time, and they always served as cautionary tales, and I think that's true of a lot of what we now call urban legends and folklore. They were things that were meant to impart fear onto somebody to prevent them from engaging in dangerous behavior.
If you ever get the chance to find it, it's a little harder to find these days, but it's still around. An unedited, unexpurgated, for lack of a better term, a copy of Grimm's fairy tales. But these weren't Disney films. These were stories out of the blood and the bone. I mean, there's one called How Children Play Butcher with Each Other, if I'm getting that title right. That is just a hoot of a read. Yeah, it's fun times. Get a Disney princess on screen with that one.
Yeah, the bit. Do you guys remember the Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark books?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
We have some right
And
here.
Stephen Graham, I think, was the...
Gamble? Stephen Gamble, is that
Good.
right?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, those were awesome. And those were...
Yeah.
follow the same trajectory of the old Grimm's fairy tales, where they don't really hold anything back. I mean, those are adult stories that have just been not watered down, but...
Yeah, that kids need the sort of honest scare, for lack of a better term. Well, you know, we talk about the Disneyfying of some fairly intense Grimm's fairy tales that have since become very, very harmless, Disney movies over the last 40, 50, 60 years. I'm a believer in the fact that the kids need an honest scare.
Yeah.
We don't need to sort of shelter them from that. Because an understanding of what lurks in the dark, helps appreciate the light more. I feel that feels poetic and trite, but
Yeah.
No, you're right. It's a way of making, like fear is a real emotion that people will experience in their lifetime, and and the same way that you can inoculate a child against a disease like chickenpox by introducing it to them in a controlled environment when they're younger. You can do the same thing with complex emotions like fear and the understanding of mortality, with things like scary movies and scary stories that's in a completely controlled and safe environment, where they can be reassured that in the end, nothing is going to change. At the end of this story, you're still going to be here. You might be a little spooked, but like you said, it's an important, development for any person.
Terry Pratchett once, I believe it's in his sort of book that's a little more satirical of Christmas. He makes the point when the question is raised, why do we have these belief, for lack of without getting into the actual book, their version of Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny, and he posits the theory that as teaching kids as small children to believe in things like Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny and things like that helps pave the way for, as they become older, to believe in things like truth and mercy and justice. I mean, these are things that are just as ethereal as Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny, but because we learned early on to believe in these things, it's easier for us to wrap our brains around these sort of abstract concepts that are in the end of the day no more physically there than Santa Claus or the Easter Bunny. And I always thought that was kind of an interesting way of looking at a possible byproduct of having these sorts of sort of traditional folklore and urban legend. As we're talking about this stuff, we're starting to edge into the history of urban legend and folklore. So this might be as good a time as any. Let's take a quick break. We will be right back with you. When we come back, let's talk a little bit more in depth about urban legend and folklore throughout history that we've run across. So do stick with us. We'll be right back. You are listening to Revolving Culture.
The Hook is essentially the story of a young couple who go to the local lover's lane to park. That is, they park the car and they start making out. They've got the radio on for music, when all of a sudden it's interrupted by the voice of an announcer.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special news bulletin.
And tells them that a maniac has escaped from the local insane asylum. They can tell who he is because he's got a hook in place of one of his hands. The guy wants to continue making out, of course, but the girl is getting a little freaked out, and after a while she just insists that they get out of there. He backs up the car, and he roars out of there. When they get back to her place, he gets out of the car, goes around, and he's about to open the door when he finds the hook, which has been ripped off the maniac's hand.
And welcome back to Revolving Culture. We are looking this week at urban legends and folklore. And we started to kind of touch on the historical examples of urban legend and folklore. And there's just, that's almost a bottomless pool of examples. But, this sort of comes out of oral tradition, maybe the oldest form of communication Homo sapien created. There's history's rife with these sorts of urban legends. I know personally I can think of Prester John during the Middle Ages and certainly during the Crusades and just prior to and then just after was the Western Europe and their residing belief that somewhere past the Middle East, often Asia or India, was this legendary kingdom of Prester John, a Christian kingdom on the other side of all the heathens. And if they could just get an emissary to this kingdom of treasure and magic, that Prester John would come and aid them in the crusade. I mean, it might have been the Second Crusade. Almost all of their hope was pinned on getting someone word to Prester John that if they started the crusade, he would join them and he and his soldiers from his magical kingdom would help them, and that would be the end of the the infidel in the Middle East, and they believed with such a fervor that men died in the jungles of Asia trying to locate this sort of hidden kingdom, not entirely unlike Shangri-La, sort of is part of that. Andrew, what did you run across as far as some historical examples of urban legend? And
one thing I kind of wanted to touch on is the delineation between folklore and urban legend. Though the title urban legend would lead one to believe that it would take place in an urban atmosphere, that's not entirely true. Urban legends, the moniker or nomenclature is used to delineate classical folklore with modern folklore. So anything that involves kind of like what you might run across in modern times, like the fears and trials that you would come across nowadays, just, I guess, in our own world.
We have a lot of urban legends that center around Hollywood and actors and automobiles and driving on the highway and rural roads and stuff like it. Urban legends seem to really hone into our fears based on modern technologies and modern cultural centers of media and stuff like that.
Like the way we talked about, was it one of our last episodes? We talked about industrialism and how that kind of brought about the modern age. It was the leisure episode.
Yeah.
You could kind of draw parallels to when urban legend as a term was invented. Not exactly invented, but where you could trace it back, because the term itself was first coined in like 1968 in an article. But most of the stuff that I've come across was I think everybody's heard the guy who wakes up in a tub of ice and he finds a note that is letting him know that his kidneys were removed.
That kind of plays on the idea of how far medical procedure had come, that you could have a surgical process done in your body and, very minimal evidence be left on you and no pain whatsoever, so kind of this fear of something being taken from you without you knowing.
And I think it's also born of I think in the story, some versions of the story is like the guy meets a woman the night before at a party or something like that, something innocuous, and has a night of passion with her or whatever. And
how steamy is this passion?
We're about to get deep into this. Nope. So they're preying on, not preying on so much as like any of these are cautionary tales. You go out, you have too much fun,
exposing vulnerabilities.
Fucking bad.
Don't trust women.
Don't trust women, guys. I got to.
To what degree to what degree do you guys think that urban legend develops out of the sort of the switch from this country, especially from a more rural to a more, for lack of a better word, a more urban setting? Do we think this is maybe to some degree, an evolution of what would have been urban legend to the rural early Americans? Their urban legends tended to be more heroic tales of Davy Crockett and Paul Bunyan and things like that. Whereas, and those were meant to be sort of legends that gave you something to shoot for positively. Whereas as sort of society as a nation became a much more city nation, these legends start to become more about our distrust for, our fear of what a stranger may do, or our fear of our vulnerability to the evil intentions of some sort of, capital O other out there.
Right.
Or am I just talking out of my butt here?
Well, I think legends almost always expose our baser fears of things that we don't understand, monsters that we think exist, but really it's just a person who it's a psychological malady that we don't understand, or something that we demonize or turn into a monster. And so these legends are formed around them. People who went on long voyages, and maybe they were intoxicated by something, or maybe they were just driven to delirium by their journey, but they go back to tell of sea monsters and stuff like that, like
mermaids
and
and to kind of further give more example to your point is whenever you always hear the stories of like going to the city, meeting somebody, like this story in particular where the guy goes to a party that's probably filled with people, meets a strange woman, and then winds up losing his kidneys. Anyway, it's not a normal story, but the thing is, like, you've seen it turn also because we're so urbanized now. We all live in cities, or vast majority live in cities. You've seen movies like Wrong Turn or Texas Chainsaw Massacre or Deliverance.
Yeah,
sort of a fish out of water. Being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Just to use up some cliches that I always have in my back pocket here.
Hey, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, those are to me, like modern, examples of something that you could see in, folklore and fairy tales, like Little Red Riding Hood. Which when you really look at what Little Red Riding Hood is, it's a story that is seemingly meant to warn, children and especially young girls of predation by adults. Like I don't think there's they're characterized as the enemy is characterized as the big bad wolf, posing as the grandmother, but I think the real intent of that story is to let young girls know that there are lecherous people out there who would try to take advantage of them, and and you should have a healthy distrust of strangers, and don't presume that just because somebody's being nice to you that they have your best interest at heart, and And so many of, to touch, on what Jeremy was saying, a lot of this is, a result of the fear of the unknown and, just needing to find an imperative to make each other understand that there's behaviors that you shouldn't engage in, because there's a high likelihood that there's danger involved. And, there's probably an evolutionary imperative as well for us to err on the side of caution when we hear about that kind of, when we hear that kind of warning or that kind of story, because, if we believe that we could die by, engaging in that behavior, then we're more likely to not engage in it and stay alive and thus perpetuate, our species. And
it makes me think of, one that now we sort of recognize is an urban legend, but 40 years ago, if you'd have brought it up, it was considered stone cold scientific fact, unassailable rock of Gibraltar truth, was you never go swimming less than 30 minutes after you've eaten a meal.
Yeah.
It was just something that was gospel truth, regardless of location, regardless of social standing, regardless of, everybody knew this was just a fact that you simply didn't argue with. And we've since, and I'm not sure at what point, but we now know that there's just absolutely no truth to it. You're not going to cramp up and die if you go swimming after eating a hot dog. But it was one of those things that that generations of kids behaved well at the pool because they were told, if you go in that water, you're gonna die.
Yeah, and that's an interesting example, I think, too, because it when you think about it, the people who were likely to repeat that, or rather the person who you would learn that fact from was probably your parents, especially your mother. In all likelihood, and it's I think that's why they were called, that, like, it seems almost like a pejorative term, but they, they're oftentimes thought of as old wives' tales.
Oh yeah,
because it's passed around from wife to wife and mother to mother to serve as a again, a warning from parent to parent, like, here's something you should watch out for, but like you said, Marty, it's since been proved to be untrue, and I think that's why that's another thing that delineates the urban legends from folklore is so much is known to us now, so many things that were once in the dark, we've shed light on, and I think the more modern examples of urban legend and folklore wind up being not necessarily things that are meant to impart a lesson or let you know what might be dangerous, but things that amount to gossip. Earlier, Jeremy mentioned, celebrities, and that's a breeding ground for every kind of myth to be, good or bad or otherwise.
Andrew, did you have something you want to say?
I wanted to tag on to the old wives' tale thing. One of my favorite old wives' tales is it when you're a kid, if you are sticking your tongue out or making a goofy face, and your mom or whomever tells you, if somebody slaps you in the back of the head, your face is going to stay that way.
Yeah, you'll get stuck that way. Yeah.
Or don't swallow your gum.
Pop rocks.
Yeah, don't swallow your gum. Yeah.
That one's my favorite.
Pop rocks and soda.
Yeah.
Pop rocks and soda. One thing I was looking at is we were talking about a delineation between urban legend and folklore as a classical form, which would include like Grimm's fairy tales and things like that, and where I think there's a clear delineation is urban legends normally will be set in a real world atmosphere, things that might happen, even no matter how outlandish could happen to somebody, and I'm sorry, Jeremy's making stupid faces. Anyway, so folklore could land on the side of sometimes cryptozoology, which would be, as discussed, Krampus or La Llorona.
I would argue that maybe there's, I would say there's perhaps an argument to be made for the fact that urban legend is the urban folklore. The folklore of the Old West or the westward expansion era, that was to them, that was their world. And however, ridiculous it might sound that Paul Bunyan created the Grand Canyon, that was their world that they inhabited. It's hard to say how clear cut that delineation might be. At least in my opinion, that's certainly just me.
It might be because of a story in prior times, like before modern age. It was easier to give these lessons through these fantastical stories, whereas nowadays,
we talked about it last time, how important storytelling has been throughout history.
Yeah.
But sometimes these stories have absolutely no moral lesson to be learned. There's really no
entertain.
Yeah.
Right. But I have a really good example of this where there's no reason to believe this. It's just a plain misunderstanding of sometimes it's just a misunderstanding of a word. Mm-hmm. It can be as simple as that. I remember when I think I was in high school, may have been after high school. People thought that it was whenever energy drinks were reaching like peak popularity. People thought that the ingredient taurine was derived from bull semen or bull testicles. They thought that it was, straight just pulled by a syringe, I guess, out of bull balls or jerked off out of them.
Manually manipulated out of the...
But I looked it up and it's been verified as false by Snopes that Red Bull and other energy drinks do not contain bull semen.
But Surge definitely lowers your sperm count, right?
I don't know.
Because of all the bull semen.
But we can understand where people would have got that idea from. Taurine, if you break the word down, Taurus, bull, "ine," the suffix "ine" means that it's from that root word. So people thought from the bull, that's what taurine is.
Yeah.
That is that's a really like playful example of what I think is almost another entire class of urban legend, and that is manipulative ones that are meant to almost serve as pranks. So like another example of a pretty harmless one would be the if your hand is bigger than your face, that means you have cancer, which then it preys on that fear of like, oh my God, is my hand bigger than my face? I'm going to put my hand right up against my face and cover my eyes, and my friend is gonna push my hand into my face and smash my nose. And it's.
I still always wonder, do I have cancer afterwards?
Other examples of silly ones like that kids come up with are things like Bloody Mary and the like, where it's meant to serve almost like a parlor trick where I'm going to convince my friend to go stand in front of a mirror in the dark potentially and see if they have the courage to say Bloody Mary 3 times in the mirror, and little do they know that me and the rest of the friends are on the other side of the door waiting for them to say it the 3rd time, and we're gonna bust through the door and scare the bejesus out of them.
Well, and that's one of the things, I mean, because this is the time of the year and the season, and it's kind of what prompted us to talk about this, to pick this topic to really discuss, is there is a plethora of the really creepy urban legends and tales. And Andrew, you were kind of interested in one that originated from my home stomping grounds in Oklahoma. If you want to go ahead and share that one.
Oh, here we go. Carol Ann Smith was a woman who lived in Tulsa in the 1940s. Smith kept to herself, except for the loud rituals she held in her home. Neighbors eventually called the cops, who found 2 women in cages in Smith's basement. They had been there for over 10 years. Smith was thrown in jail, but people say that her house's foundations are still around, and that they attract a fair amount of negative paranormal activity. Yeah, that's one I'd never heard before.
It's a true story? I mean, that's true crime. That's straight up true crime. That's not...
up until the point where you start dealing with the paranormal foundations of the house. Yeah. Coming from Oklahoma, in northern Oklahoma, especially closer to Indian reservations, you would find all sorts of of Native American legends that had kind of morphed into more urban legends, like the deer woman was one I recall. She was less a thing to be feared and more a thing to be like a wild creature that you respected by keeping your distance, because if you didn't, it wasn't going to end real well for you. Sort of the Native American version, I guess, of a female centaur. She was half woman, half deer, and that sort of stuff really. I mean, there was one. Wasn't there one in Texas that you found also, Andrew?
Yeah, that one's kind of lame. So I found this really cool article I'm going to put up on the website about every state's either scariest or most popular urban legend. This one is a ghostly face that won't disappear off UT medical school building in Galveston. The legend says that the face is of a man who originally owned the building and didn't want it donated to the medical school. I'll put up pictures and everything of the face, which kind of looks like a cartoon.
What did he own that building for?
I remember as a kid, and I don't remember if it was when I was visiting my family in Brownsville or somewhere, but seeing Jesus in a tree and like going to the tree, like going to visit it. And everybody's like, oh, my God, and taking pictures. And I was like, I don't see anything. I don't know what these people are talking about.
Yeah, in some cases, that is a sort of a sense of you kind of have to want to see it's there.
Do you remember when we were about to get married and I wanted us to stay at the Hotel Lawrence in downtown because the 10th floor was haunted?
Uh-huh.
So that's another urban legend.
Yeah, there's a not a cafeteria, a cafe just out here between where I'm located
Waco?
in Midlothian and Waxahachie, Texas. That's haunted, and it has been the subject of several television shows regarding its haunting.
Is it the Catfish Plantation?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
It's a restaurant.
Take that
It's
back.
a haunted restaurant. Also, Grapevine, Texas has has a haunted hotel, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's the lady of the... What?
I was just saying you can say any building is haunted.
Yeah. This
There you
building
go.
is haunted.
This
There was a
building is
fire.
really old, actually. So, the lady of White Rock Lake, the ghost lady of White Rock Lake. But I think
There's also a ghost of Preston Road in Dallas. If you drive at night, you can see a ghost.
I think the lady of White Rock Lake exists in like every place that has like a large body of water.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's gotta be.
And
Every
it's
single
interesting that some of these things, come out, have evolved. We're getting into these sorts of the urban legends that are scary, but that had a little more grounding in maybe a grim shade of reality, for lack of a better way of describing it. Like you guys were mentioning earlier, that I had never heard of, which was the car headlight / gang initiation.
Yeah, that one's weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's basically there was an urban legend of gang initiation wherein the victim. Well, let's say this first. The gang member would drive without his headlights on at night, and if a good Samaritan were to flash their high beams or brights at them, the gang member would be then forced to kill that person as part of their initiation.
That was their selection.
And that was part of the movie Death Sentence with Kevin Bacon.
Really?
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think that had like its premise in that. I want to say
I think it
yes.
also gained popularity because it was reported on the news. And
didn't you guys say that your parents were like really?
Yeah, my grandmother.
This was really
frightened
something
by
the
it.
parents were almost more scared of than kids.
Right. But some of these urban legends do make it to the news. The media will report on them as fact if they're uninformed, and that just perpetuates the fear.
Yeah, it's one authority figure passing it on to another. It's the news outlet airing it because it's an interesting story. This is modern news. We don't worry about fact checking or waiting for any kind of evidence before we report on it. And then the worrisome parent hears it and instantly fears for the life of their child and their loved ones, and immediately starts parroting out to them, hey, if you see a car that that's driving around with its lights off, don't you dare blink your lights at them to prompt them to turn them on, because in doing so you're drawing the short straw, and they're gonna come after you.
I think I heard.
And it's interesting that as these, I'm sorry, go ahead, Jeremy.
Oh, I just real quickly I wanted to say I think I heard another version of the story when I was younger, that if you flashed your brights, like someone who was driving with their headlights off might be like a serial killer or just a murderer. It wasn't really gang related. It was just if you flash your brights at someone, they might just murder you. So it was just a very general legend.
It's just a very general murder.
Yeah.
Do you remember the story? It's called High Beams, and it's the story of a girl who's driving home. She's a college girl. It's always a college girl, and she's driving home alone at night from like a pep rally or something. And as she's driving on a dark road, let's say it's 2-lane, one going one way and one going the other, a car starts speeding behind her, and they start flashing their high beams at her, and she's worried, like what the fuck is this guy doing? Like why does he keep flashing his high beams at me? So she tries to speed up, and no matter how fast she goes, he keeps up with her and keeps doing it, and she's freaked out at this point. Just why can't I shake this guy? Of course, they don't have cell phones because this story was, from the 50s on. And so she's
farther than that. That's there's a version of it in the 1930s. It was a radio drama.
Yeah, and she's driving and driving. Finally, she gets home, and she's honking her horn, trying to wake up whoever's inside. Her dad comes out onto the lawn with a shotgun or whatever, and the truck pulls up behind her. She gets out of the car, and the guy gets out, trying to beg for forgiveness, saying, hey, there's been someone in the back of your car the entire time. I've been following you. I've been trying to, scare them off by flashing my high beams. Police come, and they find that, there's a killer in the back with a knife or some shit.
Yeah. And that's that story, to this day just gives me the creeps. I mean, it always has. That's been one of those sort of truism, scary stories, like the phone call was coming from inside the house.
I was just thinking that. I was like, this is the automotive version of the phone call is coming from within the house.
And it will still to this day give you goosebumps, just the thought of it.
So all these stories are basically teaching us,
I've never heard
trust
that, but that's
strangers, but trust every stranger at the same time.
And it's curious that as this has, we were talking about how these sorts of things have become more perpetuated through the media and through quote unquote news outlets and things like that. And it's interesting that they achieve an almost not celebrity status, but Jeremy, you mentioned it's become almost a source of tourism. People kind of going out of their way to expose themselves to these sorts of the scarier or the more ethereal urban legends.
Yeah, there is an activity, I guess, it's been dubbed legend tripping. But basically it's when groups of people, friends, who want to, a lot of people, want to go hang out at a graveyard or whatever, get a scare, just kind of see if any zombies or vampires are going to come. No, you guys didn't want to do that?
Oh, no, I did. When I was a teenager, there was
absolutely.
There was a cemetery right by my house, and just for fun, we would walk through it a lot.
Yeah.
And we were chased by dogs a few times. That was the most frightening thing that happened.
Were the zombie dogs?
They were zombie dogs.
They might as well have been the way we were running.
In northern Oklahoma, it was either us going out to some of the pasture land out north looking for the deer woman, or the local urban legend that said that there was a satanic cult that would meet out at the gravel pit just outside of town. And I can't tell you the number of times that we probably all loaded up into a car and we were bound and determined we were going to hunt down the Satanists to stop them from killing that goat or whatever they were going to do.
Trying to get into some true detective shit.
That Marty, that's legend tripping. Going to, I guess, try to evoke the stuff of the legend, try to witness it yourself, and really make the legend an experience in your life. It could be like a rite of passage sort of thing, or just for fun. A lot of locations where people go are, like I said, cemeteries, bridges, tunnels, caves, abandoned buildings, the woods, or other vacant, desolate areas that might have these legends attached to them or associated with them.
Or where like homeless people hang out, just
go to the soup kitchen.
So the Blair Witch Project was really more of a documentary about legend tripping.
I was thinking about that earlier, and I don't know because I haven't looked into it, but I think that the Blair Witch Project is the first fictionalized documentation of legend tripping. Yeah,
you talk about it, and I had not heard of sort of an official name for it, but it's an attractive prospect. I sit here and think, this would be a lot of fun to load up a bunch of us in a car and go hunting for some of this stuff. It's just I don't know if it's the thrill of the chase, but I mean it has an attraction even right now as we're talking about it. I'm game. Let's hit the car and let's see what we can find out.
I would say the most popular legend tripping is probably Bigfoot, the quest for Sasquatch.
The North American woodland ape.
And I didn't realize this until probably like 6 or 7 years ago. I tend to think of Bigfoot and the legend to be dealing more with the Cascade Mountains and the Pacific Northwest, or maybe the woods of New England. There's a fairly significant contingent of Bigfoot. We'll call it investigation surrounding Far East Texas, Jefferson, Texas. That I mentioned earlier, houses at least once a year a World Bigfoot Conference, and gathers a fairly significant worldwide, group of people that have come to that area to talk about the legend of Bigfoot as it relates to that area.
Have y'all guys taken the time to see the movie Exists?
No.
No.
No, I can't say as I have.
It's the Eduardo Sanchez, the guy that made Blair Witch Project.
Yeah.
His Bigfoot movie.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
It's
really?
Yeah.
That's intriguing.
It's not bad.
Yeah, it's not bad.
For a Bigfoot movie?
For a found footage Bigfoot movie.
I'll go and say, I'll go on record as stating he's an underrated horror director, in my opinion.
Oh, absolutely.
Like,
Blair Witch Project
if you ever get a chance,
was a piece of horror genius in my mind.
If you ever get a chance to watch Alter, I have it if anybody wants to borrow it. Not everybody who listens to the podcast, but maybe if you know me, to ask to borrow Altered. It's really good. It's an alien film.
If we can touch back on our episode 4, Summer Blockbusters and Remakes, Blair Witch Project, or I guess it's just Blair Witch, is being rebooted.
Yeah, it already came out and has gotten bad reviews.
Yeah. Very to the point where the actual filmmakers were making fun of how bad the reviews were.
Of course. Because they're sitting on their gold nuggets.
They're gold nuggets.
They made millions.
That sounds painful.
Well, they've already they've already tripled the budget of the new one too. I mean, triple or quadrupled it.
Wow.
Really?
So yeah,
I mean, the budget wasn't much to begin with.
No.
So I mean,
I didn't need to be. I mean, the Blair Witch Project budget was shoestring.
Yeah, it was non-existent.
To the extreme.
It was the most grossing movie because it had such a small budget, kind of thing.
Right.
While we're on the topic of movies and urban legends, we have to mention Urban Legend, the late 90s.
The movie franchise.
Dawson's Creek was in that, right?
Trying to capitalize on Scream. It had Jared Leto.
Oh, yeah.
Jared Leto was in it, and
wasn't Pacey from Dawson's Creek in it? What's his name?
Joshua Jackson.
Joshua Jackson. Wasn't he in it?
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't remember. He might have been in the other one.
I've never seen the movie.
I'm familiar with them. I don't know that I've ever seen them, so I'm not.
I've seen quite a few of them too.
We're kind of. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Tales from the Crypt.
Yeah, that was awesome.
That was really good.
A lot of those
were cautionary
shows had
tales,
cautionary tales,
Yeah.
morals.
Yeah, a lot of those old EC comics. I mean, that was a whole genre of comic book that's really what they were doing, was communicating all of these collected old kind of horror legends that they'd come across. And we are kind of creeping into what I would consider maybe to be more modern takes on urban legends. So this might be as good a time as any. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, let's kind of talk about what the next generation of urban legend, what kind of cautionary tales are going to be passing on to the next generation. So let's take a quick break. When we come back, let's talk about maybe the urban legend of the future, or where we think this particular phenomenon might be evolving. Stick with us. You are listening to Revolving Culture. And welcome back to Revolving Culture. We've been talking about urban legend and folklore this week. And just as we were kind of encroaching into the more modern folklore and urban legend, Robbie, you had a story about a guy who had, by being a hermit, had kind of an urban legend had been built around him, almost for a community of people. Did you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I came across this story a couple of years ago, and it utterly fascinated me. It's the whole thing took place in rural Maine, and there was a community of people who over the course of decades, 27 years to be exact, experienced a systematic series of break-ins into their homes. Never when anyone was present in the home. It was always when the homes were empty. But they would come home to find that that there had been a break-in, and food and basic supplies had been taken from them. And this was occurring upwards of 40 times a year to this relatively small community of people, living out in just really remote rural Maine. And this urban legend kind of grew around these incidences of an idea of somebody who must be living out in the woods, and was stealing this food to survive. And I think some people saw it as sinister and somebody who meant harm, but over time, it kind of proved to be just somebody who was obviously just trying to keep themselves alive, and people certainly wanted to find him and make him accountable, but there were just as many people who I think wanted to help him. There's examples of people leaving notes, saying things, like please just tell me what it is you need and I'll give it to you. Just don't break in. Don't, come in without permission, but we'll provide for you. And, it went unanswered. And, so this went on for years and years. And, there were kids who grew up with the knowledge of this person, that might break into their home at any time. And I think almost like the opposite, earlier we talked about how parents would, warn children of be careful, behave, otherwise, the boogeyman will get you, or, things like this. I think almost the opposite of, idea had to be taken by some of these parents who had no control over the situation and knew that this person was likely going to strike them soon, and they didn't want their kids to live in fear of the idea of somebody invading their home. And so they had to characterize him as the hungry man. It's like, no, he's not coming to hurt you. He just needs food. He's coming to get food, and he's never hurt anybody up to now, so we have no reason to think he's going to suddenly start hurting people at this point. But anywho, all of this came to an end a few years ago in 2013, I believe, when he was finally caught in the act, and it came to light that he was a man named Christopher Knight, who at the age of 20 in right around 1986. Wandered into the woods and remained there for 27 years, and lived, completely hermetically, just, off remotely in the woods. He had built himself a campsite, and he was so insistent on not being found that he never once built a fire for fear that someone would see the smoke. And so he managed to survive, 26, 27 northern winters, completely without the warmth of a fire, which is, a true act of death defiance. And once he was found, and it was the whole story was brought to light, and it turned out that he was just a willing recluse who wanted really nothing to do with society, wanted to live as a true hermit, and is just a fascinating character. I encourage anybody listening to this to Google for it was an article published by GQ magazine. It's called "The Strange and Curious Tale of the Last True Hermit," but it gives you a pretty good idea of the existence that this guy had and what his motivations were. But I just think that he's a really interesting example of something in our modern time, that even though we live in an age where so much is known to us, and we're so capable of knowing things, of finding out the truth, that there still can be genuine mysteries. And were it not for a simple mishap on his part, one night, and him getting caught, he potentially would have continued this behavior until he died, and it would have ended as an honest to God mystery. He committed 1,000 break-ins, and only one of those did he get caught.
He would have truly become a stuff of urban legend.
Yes, yeah, he would have lived on as that, as only that. In his perfect ideal world, he wouldn't even be that. He didn't want to be found, and I think he's had trouble, adjusting, assimilating himself back into society. And I'm sure if given the chance, he would go back out into the woods and remain there. But it's that kind of person, and I'm sure that kind of person has existed throughout history, and they were, it's that kind of person who was probably the driving force behind a lot of, urban legends and folklore, and just the idea of a person living remotely in the woods that might be of danger to you was probably a story that was told to countless kids, in olden days, and
Right.
Yeah.
You see it manifested in in stories and movies like The Witch, which came out last year. Is a really great horror movie that is entirely that. It's a cautionary tale about what goes on in the woods. But yeah, anyway,
Jeremy, did you have something to say?
Yeah, I wanted to add to Robbie's point that he just stated, that there had to have been loads of these people who these characters and legends were based on. It was incredible to me to hear that this guy, Christopher Thomas Knight, was nearly deified, just simply because the people who he was affecting were at the ready to sacrifice themselves, their food and stuff to him to keep him from breaking into their homes. And that's the stuff of Roman and Greek and Mayan and Aztec gods. Like, this guy, I mean, he wasn't trying to attain that status, but that's what people were able to elevate him to try to secure their safety.
Well, and it's interesting that the history of hermiting, for lack of a better way of putting it, I mean, the original hermits in late antiquity and the early birth of Christianity, they were called the athletes of God. The guys, the people that went out into the wilderness, forsake all, contact, and they were doing that to prove that they didn't need anybody. They didn't, they were idolized. They were the LeBron James and the George Clooney of their day. Everybody wanted to do what they were doing because they were the kind of idols. And it's interesting that even today, there's a certain respect is maybe not the word I'm looking for, but we can appreciate someone's desire to just get away, turn off the noise, get away from everything, get off the grid. On some basic level, I think, especially as a society, we become more sophisticated, and the signal noise to ratio of life becomes so much louder. We all kind of wish we could, and I may just be speaking for myself, but we kind of, a part of us wishes we could get back out there in the woods and just stop.
Yeah, one of the interesting things that is mentioned in this GQ story about this character that I think really speaks to his dedication to the idea of, I wanted to completely remove myself from society, is that he basically believed that if he was going to be a true hermit, that means not disclosing any of his experience, and he my favorite line from the article is when the comparison to Thoreau and Walden Pond is mentioned to him, he dismisses Thoreau by calling him a dilettante, and I think what he means by that is that Thoreau wanted attention and acclaim by writing Walden and trying to communicate his experience and this transcendent time spent in solitude. And for him it's he's like, no, that's not for other people, it's for yourself. You've created this existence, and it's only meant for you. And I'm just endlessly fascinated with this person.
Well, and this is a pretty good point to we're trying to think about what the next generation of urban legend might be. I mean, this might be a pretty good example because it combines a modern sensibility maybe, but like you were saying earlier, it also feels a lot like the urban legends of an earlier time.
Right now, I kind of wanted to talk about a little bit, just touch on urban legends and folklore around the world, the little bit that we've done research on.
We talked about Krampus earlier, and
Crunkus.
And I wanted to touch a little
bit
on La Llorona. And for those who don't know, she's a woman who's there's variations of the story where she killed her children in a river herself, for her husband, or because of her husband, or her children were killed at the river by somebody else. There's chupacabra, which I think a lot of people know, which literally means suck on goats or suck goat sucker.
Goat sucker.
Yeah. And then El Cucuy, which I know I mentioned before that as a kid was a real thing that my parents told me.
What is the cuckoo?
El Cuckoo is a variation of El Cucuy.
Because when we were watching RuPaul's Drag Race, there was one guy on there who referred to his butt as a cuckoo.
Oh, that's something else. That's Mi Cuckoo. Yeah, it's actually a song, Mi Cuckoo.
Oh, okay.
Or I don't think it's Mi Cuckoo, but it talks about butts. It's a Spanish song about butts.
He liked his butt.
Yeah.
Or she.
Butts are...
They're butts.
They're butts. Some people like them.
And I mean,
so cuckoo and El Cucuy are not the same thing. Okay. But there are some, I think, from what I understand, some Latin American countries that have a variation of El Cucuy, and they don't call it El Cucuy.
Okay.
But anyway, as I was saying.
What's El Cucuy?
It's a boogeyman.
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah.
But the Japanese have urban legends as well. There's the split-mouthed woman, which is Kuchisake Onna, and the story with her goes that she was slighted at some point. Somehow she was slighted, and she killed herself. But then You might see her walking along a road, a woman wearing something over the bottom half of her face. She's usually carrying a large set of shears, and she would take whatever is covering her face off, ask if you think she's beautiful. If you respond negatively, she would then kill you.
Heard that.
There's another one called Teki Teki, which is the tale goes that a woman was pushed off of, onto a rail, and the train came through and sliced her in half and killed her. So now, if you see this ghost or apparition, she would crawl towards you on just her hands, still sliced in half, with a blade in her hand, and the blade makes the sound teki teki. And so that's
Do you think that what was the woman with the split mouth?
Kushisake Onna.
Do you think that she inspired the Mortal Kombat character Melina?
Oh,
she
kind of looks like
Very
Baraka.
possible.
She kind of looks like Baraka.
Melina has Baraka mouth.
Yeah, Baraka mouth.
That sounds like a painful disorder.
So that's urban legends and folklore from around the world.
I like it.
Now talking about a lot of the stuff we were discussing, in the future, the internet is sort of breeding its own form of urban legend. We were talking earlier about Slenderman, and you guys mentioned something that I had only caught in passing, creepypasta.
Yeah, creepypasta. The name creepypasta comes from the word copypasta, an internet slang term for a block of text that gets copied and pasted over and over again from website to website. Creepypastas are the internet equivalent to the friend of a friend urban legend source. So Slenderman was born of this. Someone called Jeff the Killer was also... Yeah.
That's such a pedestrian name.
Jeff the Killer. There's also a band called Jeff the Brotherhood. I wonder if there's any ties. But is anybody familiar with Slenderman?
Just the game. I don't know.
Unfortunately, just as it found its way into sort of gaming culture, the video game that was put out for, which as I understand it, did not do justice to the sort of greater urban legend that is the Slender Man.
I think it's a really fascinating example of something that began as a joke and just was given life by an enthusiasm of the people who wanted to build this idea of what it was, and this collective consciousness of everybody's gonna collaborate to create this story and this mythology of it, and to think that it had such a powerful influence, and was so out of control from its beginnings as this, frankly, just silly idea, this thing that was little more than a joke that ultimately culminated in that. What I learned now was only an attempted murder. I understood it to be that young girl was murdered by the other. For those who don't know, there was a circumstance a couple of years ago where some young kids claiming to be influenced by Slenderman attempted to murder another young girl, and
yeah, they wanted to prove the skeptics wrong, I think was the quote. The Slenderman skeptics.
Force belief.
For those that...
It was a shared delusion between two girls.
I'm looking at information on Slenderman, and his influence reached even an episode of My Little Pony. A pony version of the character appears in a brief cameo.
God, My Little Pony is so dark.
And maybe this is a thing that because the internet, whatever we think of as the internet now, will probably bear no resemblance to what the internet evolves into, let's say 20 years from now. maybe the form that urban legend takes in the future is more less word of mouth and more like trying to create a realism either through video or photoshopped pictures or stuff like that, like trying to, and maybe I'm not explaining it well, but that this will be less a word of mouth oral tradition and more a visual. It's going to feel much more real because you'll be able to see these things and hear these things and am I making any sense or am I just talking out?
I think it'll be both. I think that there's still an oral aspect to it. What I think the internet changes most is the something I've been repeating throughout this is we give these ideas strength based on the authority of the person who's telling it to us. Whether it's a parent or a news source or something like that, and the internet, create there's it's no mystery that there's not a lot of accountability on the internet when it comes to things that are written or when ideas are expressed, and I think that that ideas can take on a strength with virtually no fact checking, and I've been subject to it myself. I like to imagine that I'm a very that I'm not easily fooled by sensationalist ideas, but I was totally taken in by an idea that I had seen passed around on the internet that you shouldn't give your dogs ice cubes, that it could create a bloat in their stomach that could have dire consequences, and this is the kind of thing that, again, it's attached to a fear, in this case the fear of my dog in pain or the death of my dog, and I love my dog. I don't want my dog to be in pain, and so the moment I read those words, don't give ice to your dogs, that it could cause problems, I didn't first think to myself, well, I should do some research and see if there's really any validity to that. My first instinct was like, I'm flipping through Facebook and I see it. I'm going to share it with everyone I know because I know tons of people with dogs and I don't want them to for their dogs to be hurt either. And I had a stupid moment of pride of like, I did a good thing today. I made sure that other people are looking out for their, and that's not true. No, I perpetuated a lie, and all because I didn't want to take a moment to hold anyone accountable for that idea.
Yeah, with the advent of the internet and the furtherance of technology, it's just easier to maybe not fool people, but put these ideas out there. With like Slenderman and this Jeff the Killer guy, whatever he is. They've also started doing these TV creepypastas and video game creepypastas, whereas like they take a popular intellectual property like SpongeBob SquarePants and they dream up these lost episodes of horrible things happening. It's so strange because we've talked about urban legends to this point being like a way of cautionary tales, things like that, things you can learn by. They can entertain and they can be humorous, but the ones that are developed nowadays with media are more on the end of the macabre.
Yeah.
They're
like,
not.
What if the reality was? It was this fucked up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to. I don't know. We probably can't focus on it now because I haven't put much thought into it. But I wonder why the zeitgeist has bent that way.
Yeah, it might be a conversation that we can maybe take a look at it a little farther in depth. Because, like you said, it is something that we need to sort of parse out and consider. It could be a case of just tearing down idols, which is a very human. All throughout history, it's been a very sort of human reaction to that sort of stuff. Real quickly before we kind of wrap up, Andrew, you had found one, the clown.
Oh yeah, I don't have all the information in front of me. Maybe one of you guys do, But in South Carolina recently, there were reports of a man dressed as a clown beckoning children to come to a wooded area. And at first it was thought to be maybe a hoax or a marketing. What's the viral, like a viral marketing or some sort of advertising for like the new It movie or 31 by Rob Zombie. But it turned out to just be some loser in the woods who I guess was arrested recently.
Yeah, specifically the South Carolina guy was arrested, but there's still apparently sightings, being reported, in faraway states.
This is taking on a. Yeah, this is going to take on a life of its own, and
we've got copycat clowns
as well. And I don't.
So
it's interesting. Is it more a case of copycatting, or more a case of, just because we found out the truth behind the urban legend doesn't mean we don't still want the urban legend to be a legend. So let's keep it going. Let's try and continue to feed the monster into the public consciousness. Well, let's This seems about as good a time as any to kind of wrap up this discussion for right now. Again, we're going to have several more of these as we're getting farther into October. This is going to be kind of the month where we investigate stuff like this and kind of take a deeper look at them. Certainly, you've got to have some stories of your own urban legends from your particular part of the country or particular part of the world. By all means, please let us know. We'd certainly love to hear from you. If we've gotten your particular favorite urban legend wrong in some way, shape, or form, we certainly want to hear that as well. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter at RevCult Podcast. Jump on Facebook and let's keep the conversation going there, talking about some of these great urban legends. Let's make this a more community-wide conversation. Let's see what you guys are thinking about it. As always, you can go to revolvingculture.com. And we can carry on that conversation there. Soon to be coming, we are working on a YouTube channel, so keep your eye out for that. And certainly give us your feedback as far as this podcast is concerned. You can find us on iTunes. We're on Stitcher Radio. We're on Google Play, Spreaker. Any podcast software app that you've got will find us. Revolving Culture. We'd love to hear from you. Let us know what you think, how we're doing. And really, I think that ought to just about cover it for this evening. I'm Marty.
I'm Andrew.
I'm Robbie.
I'm
Robbie.
I'm Jeremy and Robbie.
And I'm Andrew again.
Or should we try that again, like with everybody getting their own
let's
space?
Go and we'll go Robbie
sitting around
and
Marty's table.
Yeah, Robbie, Andrew, Jeremy, Vicky.
Okay, so for everyone here at Revolving Podcast, I'm Marty.
I'm Robbie.
I'm Andrew.
I'm Jeremy.
And I'm Vicky.
And we do hope you have a wonderful week, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Goodbye.